Good time for us to bring in our guest for this hour. I'd like to welcome in criminal defense attorney in Denver, Colorado. We have Jeffrey Wolf, a friend of the program. All right, our first time talking about this terrible case there in the state of Florida. What's your overall thoughts right now and where we stand in the state's case in chief?
So the state is doing a good job of laying out the background between this relationship that the defendant has with his mother. This is an incredibly troubled kid, right? He's got a background where he was accused of murdering his father and ended up not being charged because he claimed self-defense, and the Oklahoma Sheriff's Department where that occurred said they couldn't disprove that it was self-defense. Down in Florida, he's doing the same thing. He's been accused of murdering his mother. He's claiming self-defense, but in Florida, they didn't bite and they've charged him with it. And so what the state is doing here is they are laying the foundation of this relationship and these conversations with his mother and the tumultuous nature of their relationship that would give him the motive to actually harm her versus her not having the motive to harm him, which would refute the fact that he was having to defend himself from her, that she didn't have a violent nature towards him and she didn't threaten him, that he was routinely obstinate with her and that he just had ill intent towards her, essentially.
Well, you know, that's the interesting thing that you bring up, right, is motive in all of this, because the defense says that it was self-defense, but the state of Florida they're claiming that he killed his mom to cover up the murder of his dad because she was going to expose him. And that's what this jury is hearing about here when the mom is saying, I'll expose you, show who you really are, your admissions on Ring camera, and then talks about his probation or whatever the situation is there. But can they connect the dots if they can't before the jury say that he killed his father?
Right, because the judge has said that they can say that there was a previous allegation against him that was uncharged, but they can't say it was his dad. And so that makes it really tricky for the state to have to basically tiptoe around what does mom know and how does she know it. And so what they're going to need to do essentially is allude to this amorphous allegation that's out there that mom is aware of without talking about why she would know so much about it, when in reality the reason she knows so much about it is because it's dad, and of course that would be something she would be intimately involved in knowing the details of. And so that is going to be really hard, Matt. That is an extremely good point you bring up, was the judge's ruling, because it's highly prejudicial, right? And that's why it was excluded from the jury, because if he was accused of killing dad and now mom's dead, well, where there's smoke there's fire. That's why it's so prejudicial, and it's uncharged conduct.
Yeah, and you know what? We'll see what happens after this trial if he's charged in that case. It's still open. Jeffrey Wolf, you're going to be sticking with us. Coming up, Detective Danny Peters is on cross-examination in the deadly son murder trial for Colin Griffith. We'll be right back. You're watching Court TV. Let's bring in my guest for this hour to discuss. Criminal defense attorney Jeffrey Wolf, watching along with you at home. All right, so already out the gate, I think that we're going to get a very different trial here. You know, you have this special prosecutor, Hank Brennan. Defense team is also added to their team. Arguing there for this case was Robert Alessi. But, you know, what makes a defense is the ability to have a battle of the experts, right?
Yeah, absolutely. If the state wants to exclude a defense theory of the case, saying that it just doesn't jive with what their expert says, so it can't be proper science, it's really not an opportunity for Karen Reed to defend herself. Now, if they can bring in a credible prosecution expert pre-trial to say that what the defense is trying to put on is complete junk science that is unsupported by any scientific basis, well, that's a horse of a completely different color. But just putting forth a motion to say that it doesn't make sense and it doesn't fit the facts of the case, that is not a proper way to exclude a defense expert, because you're entitled to your theory of the case and you're entitled to defend yourself. And so what we're always going to see when we do a mistrial and a second trial is that the prosecution and the defense know what's coming and they're going to do everything they can to combat it. But it shouldn't include just trying to exclude every type of defense that was run in the first trial by the prosecution, or every type of prosecution that was run in the first trial by the defense. you have to just re-strategize. You have to rework things. Bringing in new lawyers is a great idea by both sides, quite frankly, because it has different voices and different ideas coming forward so that not everybody knows every piece of the playbook that's coming. But to not be able to run your own defense is, I think, fundamentally unfair.
And I wonder if it's so that this new prosecutor can get a Daubert hearing and get him in the hot seat and ask questions ahead of doing it in front of the jury. All right, you're going to stick with us. Coming up, we're going to head back to Florida for more testimony in the deadly son murder trial for Colin Griffith. We'll be right back. And with that witness will be done with testimony, and they're going to be done for the day. But let's bring in our guest to discuss this as we approach the top of the hour. Jeffrey Wolf, nice to see you again. So really what we have with this witness is the theme of motive for the state, right? Like he's going to be exposed, supposedly, and then also the desensitization, if I can say it, with violent video games. But then you have mindset with the defense is trying to prove that he was in fear of his life and his mom was acting in a certain kind of way.
Yeah, absolutely. The defense did a really good job of basically telling the jury, you're going to have to decide who was the real threat here and who was the one that was really acting irrationally. Because what they start to bring out and what they do is they basically use the prosecution's case in chief to start admitting exhibits, right? And they even point out to the jury that it's unusual for the defense to do this because the judge says, you're going to admit exhibits in their case? And they say, yeah, that's what we're going to do. And they started admitting exhibits through a prosecution witness and say, here's the stuff that your investigation showed you that the prosecution didn't bring in and didn't show to this jury. Let's look at the text messages the mom was sending. Let's look at the video that we have of the way she was acting and the way she was out of control and the way she was ramping up leading up to the day when her son had to defend himself against her. And it was great defense work and using the state's own witness and own evidence against them with their witness. It was masterful.
So do you think that he's going to have to testify? It's in the state of Florida. He's claiming self-defense.
You never have to testify. Never. You're never required to testify in your own defense. But sometimes it is a good strategy if you're really going to get your story out there. But the defense is doing a really good job of painting the picture without him needing to.
Yeah, well, we know that. You know, the defense never has the obligation to put on a case, but you always wonder with self-defense. All right, thank you so much. We're coming back to more cases here at Court TV that we're following when we return.